Hi, this is Roy D with another Wake Up America. So, I've heard a lot of people talking and discussing on boards and stuff, and on the internet, Facebook, YouTube, where have you, different, social media, talking about how the government's bad, how they're passing unconstitutional laws, that these wars are unconstitutional, they're undeclared, they're killing a lot of people, civilians by the millions, that whatever the platform might be for your particular grievance against the government. And here is my response. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. Because if you truly did care about these issues, then you wouldn't be just complaining about it on some kind of board somewhere, or complaining about it on Facebook or on YouTube like I am currently right now. The difference is I actually back up what I say by taking it to my senators and my congressmen. And some of you might be disenfranchised by that. It doesn't work. Well, there's also things, and I'll provide a link, that you can do to basically tell your senators and representatives, or whoever the political person is. They could be sheriff, or mayor, or whoever. They have to do with the government whatsoever. This can apply, that you can have them impeached. The civilians have a right to have these people scrutinized. It is our right as civilians to hold them to the fire. And we can do it. I used to think that the only way we could do it is a voting process. And I know, you know how screwed up I think that is. I'd like to think that there is actually some grain of truth to the whole process, but that, I think, is just hope. But here we have an actual process which provides for us to impeach those people who have wronged us through the Constitution and hold them to the fire. It may or may not work, but that's just one way. I discussed before about making your own Declaration of Independence. I think also that maybe we should take it to one step more and bring together our own collective civilian Declaration of Independence from this tyrannical fascist government system that we currently have. There's more than enough crimes to hold them accountable for. So, am I calling for revolution? Essentially, yes, I am. These pompous, self-serving, ideological, hypocritical politicians need to be uprooted from their seats and thrown back into the civilian class. And we should replace them with people with actual merit, worth, and adherence to the Constitution. Now, I know some of you out there don't believe in any kind of government. I feel you. I understand. I really do. But unfortunately, I feel at this time the government of some form, and I mean by small, minuscule amount of government, is needed just for some regulatory purposes. Minute. Not this centralized monument to godhood that they have erected for themselves, and which make all of us worship. Yeah, I said it. But yes, I feel that if you're not doing something for it, if you're all you're doing is sitting there playing with your iPhones and Oh yeah, that's bad. It's horrible that we just bombed 1,000,000-some people off in the Middle East that were civilians and had nothing to do with the war. That's so bad. Now, where's my Doritos? You're part of the problem, my friend. And if you're unwilling to fight this fight against the government in order to secure your constitutional rights, then there's no apology for you. There is no excuse. These bread and circuses that they have provided for you is the blindfold that they wrap around you so that you do not act. The crimes of this government are so numerous that if you sit there and study it and look at it, it won't take too long to come out with a list. In fact, I kind of have one, and it's working towards my own declaration. And while I know I said I was going to write one, and I did, but whilst I was doing so, I decided that I needed to share this with the community. This is not just something that I, myself, can come up with. This needs to come from the American people. Freedom-loving, liberty-loving, constitution-abiding citizens of America whose only want in life is to provide for their families, be secure in their persons, and not have to worry about a tyrannical government sticking their blue-handed glove up their ass to find what it wants out of you, extract it, and then persecute you with it. Those smiles on those faces, I don't believe them. The words that they're saying, listen to them. They're just a big runaround. They're car salesmen. And they're not even, they're just the front men. Okay? Don't believe it. Don't believe the media. I have a video I want to talk about that specific, holding their feet to the fire. Because they need it. And they're scared. But that's a whole nother video. So let me rattle off this list real quick. And then you give me feedback. You tell me what should be taken off of this list or added to this list. Yes, this is America. And this is how we do things. Now, I modeled this declaration after the actual Declaration of Independence because it was a very good document and it served its purpose very well. And I do not presume to think that I'm the best writer. I'm sorry. The preamble is basically the same, except it's aimed towards the federal government and the government in general. But here is my list of grievances. They have adopted sordid acts and laws with such intent as to circumvent the Constitution of the United States and thereby steal for themselves certain powers and authorities not regulated to them over the people. For implementing unconstitutional laws that allow the President to override the Constitution and Congress by the means of executive order. For the use of executive order to secure all resources available to the government at their leisure during turmoil or peace. For the use of executive order to cause undeclared wars with other nations without the consent of Congress or the people. For suspending our own state legislatures' authority and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. The federal government for presiding over the states by setting themselves as a centralized government and making themselves of higher authority than the state's government, wherein they have no real jurisdiction. They have written laws in tandem with other laws, with such intent as to limit, obstruct, or remove rights enumerated in the Constitution of the United States, for writing and supporting unconstitutional laws that give freedom to the government to operate outside the laws of the Constitution. The government has delegated government power to non-government institutions, whereby they are able to establish their own policies and take away rights and liberties of the people. For removing the right to protest and redress around certain individuals and circumstances through the anti-protest law. For removing the right to be safe and secure in their effects in person from unwarranted searches and seizures through the Patriot Act, the Indefinite Detention Law, and the CISPA Law. For removing the right to natural-born citizenship through the Expatriation Law. They have written unconstitutional law that provides for the indefinite detention and assassination of American citizens by taking away their citizenship, by defining them as combatant, insurgent, terrorist, or extremist. They have written the Patriot Act, which espouses the tyranny this government is known for, that provides for the unwarranted searches of persons, their effects, their communications, and their movements. They have attempted to expand the surveillance of lawful citizens through the laws like CISPA, and by development of drone technology with express use for unwarranted surveillance and violent force. They have subjugated and demoralized the people through demeaning processes and unwarranted acts of depravity in which they are not secure in their persons or effects, for enacting laws that enable the government to perform cruel and unusual punishment through torture, and their undressing of inmates for examinations of their bodies regardless of crime or perceived threat. They have erected new offices who work outside the constitutional laws but receive government support, such as Homeland Security, TSA, and contracted mercenaries. They have erected a multitude of new offices and sent them hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance, namely the IRS, the FDA, ATF, Federal Reserve, and TSA. They have encouraged and participated in the corruption and falsification of the voting process. They have formed a false dichotomy by forcing a two-party system in government, media, and elsewhere, wherein they run an assumed oligarchy for the lack of real choice. They have, through poor management, greed, and dereliction of duty, have endangered this country's safety and sovereignty through the debasement of our currency, insolvency through insurmountable debt, and undeclared internal foreign wars. They have allowed lobbyists to bribe all branches of government for the benefit of special and their own interests. Through lobbyist activity, they have delegated corporate power over all three branches of government, wherein the people have no real redress for their complaints against government. They have muddled the legislation process with many hundreds of pages and submitted these before the House and Senate for perusal without sufficient time to examine them in an attempt to pass laws in which those men and women may not fully aware of before voting on the legislation. This does not give them ample time to read every part of the proposal and make an informed decision thereof. For adding amendments and clauses to proposed legislation having no real commonality with the original legislation in an attempt to stymie or stop the legislation from passing. They have shown proven disdain for the Constitution of the United States, which they have sworn their lives, offices to protect through words, actions, and deeds. They have construed and distorted the Constitution as if it were some malleable understanding and of unclear wording in order to steal for themselves power not granted to them and to confuse its meaning before the people. They have defamed our nation through murderous and heinous acts in many foreign lands during undeclared wars and by allowing insurmountable national debt to accumulate. They have kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures, for staging false flag events to gain the people's support for undeclared wars. They have invaded and supported undeclared wars against foreign nations, wrought civil atrocities, and caused insurgencies amongst their citizens. They have subjugated us to the jurisdiction of foreign countries through the United Nations and world governments in supremacy to our Constitution, giving their assent to these governments' laws by pretended legislation. He is at this time transporting large armies of mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with the circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled by the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. They have employed contracted mercenary troops which hold no allegiance to the Constitution for use on our own soil and abroad, wherein it would otherwise be inconvenient for the military to do so, for giving aid and comfort to our foreign enemies, for declaring war on the American citizenry, by declaring our nation a battlefield and every citizen a potential combatant, insurgent, terrorist, or extremist, for plundering the American people's wealth through regulated inflation of our nation's currency, for imposing taxes and mandatory charity on us without our consent, for using citizens' taxes to prop up failing businesses that otherwise ought to fail, for setting unaccountable regulatory and oversight agencies with the intent and purpose to monitor and control market outcomes. Now, the rest of the document as follows, with the original Declaration of Independence. That we have petitioned for redress. Many of us in the American citizenry have tried to get redress and complaints and protest. This whole year of the Occupy movement should be a testament to the will of the American people. So, please think on it. Add your thoughts, please. And let me know what should be added, if any, or anything that should be taken out. I am very interested in what you have to say. Thank you.